Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night, so it's halacha and Tanya. So last time we just started briefly what's called Shmiras Hagufa Pita. We're just talking about it before the class started about the necessity of being healthy. Now, like we said, the Rambam writes that for the body to be healthy is part of the way of serving Hashem. A sick person is not able to serve Hashem properly. So the only way a person could serve Hashem is if they're healthy. Therefore, a person, according biblically, halacha, is not allowed to do things which are dangerous to your health. You have to do things that are healthy for your health. Now, in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the quotes from the Rambam in Hilchos Deis, the Rambam has chapter after chapter of how a person should conduct their health, what they could eat, what they shouldn't eat, what they should sleep, everything from top to bottom. The problem with that is the later codifiers write. In fact, the Rambam himself leaves out a lot of remedies that the Gemara Talmud talks about, and they say because what was good in the time of the Gemara was not good in the time of later generations. The nature of the world changed, the nature of a person's body changed, and therefore, just because the Rambam says that these things are healthy to do, today doesn't apply. So the bottom line of halacha, by the way, is that what is accepted as health things should be done. Things that are unhealthy, according to halacha, should not, if you want to be technical about it, should not be done. A person needs to sleep to be healthy. A person, just very simple things that would apply today. Also, for instance, in Shulchan Aruch, it says, that Rebbe brings it down also. A person should train themselves to eat what's called pashachis. The Gemara says, and even Shulchan Aruch, the Rebbe brings it down, a person should train themselves to eat breakfast in the morning. Because then you start the day, with proper food, and you're not fasting half a day and all that.
Did the Rambam not have the foresight to say that, maybe what I'm writing now won't be applicable in 500 years?
The Rambam writes in the thing that if you keep my diet 100%, I promise you will never be you'll never be sick a day in your life. But the Rambam was writing for his generation. And therefore, as the commentators say, the Rambam himself left out many things that the Talmud says are healthy or unhealthy. So again, the Rambam wrote for his generation what was done then. I'll give you an example. The Rambam writes, a person should go into the bathhouse once a week. And that's not more. You shouldn't take a shower or bath once. Now, obviously today, it's not done like that. The Rambam writes a person should live in a city where the air is clean. A person shouldn't go from... So all these things, which we're not going to elaborate on, because, again, today, bottom line of halacha is what doctors say. And by the way, according to halacha, doctors have a Torah say in the matter. Doctors, according to Torah, you have to listen to. For instance, concerning even, let's say, surgery. If a doctor says you need surgery, the Rebbe's opinion was to get a second opinion. Now, there's a lot of guidelines in halacha, even contemporary halacha. Let's say one doctor says do surgery, one doctor says not to do surgery. So the then is you ask a third doctor. In other words, you have to follow the guidelines of Torah. I'll give you an example. If on Yom Kippur a doctor says a patient must eat, and the patient refuses to eat, and the doctor says, not even a Jewish doctor, a doctor says this person must eat, the din is you force feed him. Because if a doctor says he has to eat, the person has to eat. And the Rebbe generally wanted, when people go for surgeries or things like that, they should get a few opinions, just to make sure that everything is right. So bottom line even though in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch it's like 27 paragraphs in it, bottom line is a biblical obligation. Ushmartem ma'od l'nafshei seichem. By the way, the Torah doesn't say ushmartem l'nafshei seichem, which means guard your health. The Torah says, you have to be extremely careful in issues of health. And you're not allowed to do things that are officially not healthy. Everybody does it. Okay, they do it. Okay, the next din in Kitzur is, by the way, it's a very practical din, and that is, it's forbidden to do things that are dangerous to do. It's halacha. You're not allowed to do things. The Chachamim forbade things that are called sakana. And in many places in halacha, it says that even if contemporary doctors will say it's not dangerous, but the fact that Torah rules that is dangerous, we'll see certain examples soon. The fact that Torah says it's a dangerous food or dangerous procedure, whatever to do, then halachically you're not allowed to do it, even though medical science today will say, no, it's not a sakana. And in fact, the Gemara has an expression, chamura sakanta mi isura, that sakana is even stricter than kosher and treif. We don't rule like this, but there are many opinions in halacha that say, I'll give you an example. I'm going to elaborate just to mention the example. You're not allowed to eat fish and meat together, okay? You're not allowed to eat fish and meat together according to Torah. Even if science will prove that it's healthy today, it doesn't matter. If it's sakana, it's forbidden. Now we know in meat and milk fall into each other. So halacha, if it's nullified 1 in 60, like a little bit of milk falls into chicken soup. If it's nullified 1 in 60 times the chicken soup, it's fine, right? There are opinions in halacha that say if fish falls into chicken soup, even if there's much more than 60 times the amount, you're still not allowed to eat it. We don't rule like that in halacha, but there are very strong opinions in halacha that say something which Torah says is dangerous is even stricter than something which is kosher and forbidden. So the first thing the Rambam says, Shulchan Aruch says not, that you're not allowed to eat fish and meat. Now, which means is like this, even in halacha, and again, every time this comes up, you would have to ask a shaila Torah. Okay, what happens, and this, I can't tell you how many calls I get every Friday, that people were in a rush, and by mistake, they put in the oven at the same time, fish was cooking or baking, and the meat was baking, and they left the pots uncovered. So you have a big question. If it's a smaller oven and they're uncovered, so what happens? The steam goes from one to the next and back down, up and down. And you have to ask a shaila, but many times you wouldn't be allowed to eat either of them, because now you're having a mixture of meat and fish together, which is sakana. There are even people, even though halachically you don't need this, there are people that have separate fish pots during the year. They will have special pots that they only cook fish in. They won't use the same pot for meat. Halachically, you don't need that. Halachically, if you just cooked meat in a pot. Halachically, if you cooked meat in a pot, and now you washed out the pot, and the pot is clean, you're allowed to cook gefilte fish in it. You're allowed to cook another fish in it. As long as it's clean, even if it was used that day. Halachically, it's only when it's substantial, actual meat and actual fish together that you're not allowed to eat it. But you could benefit from it, obviously, but you're not allowed to eat it. So you can't do it. Okay. So therefore, what's the din? The din is you can eat fish and meat together. That's what everybody knows. Shabbos. And the Rambam says another interesting thing. The Rambam says because fish is lighter than meat, you should always eat the fish first and then the meat. By the way, halachically, okay, let me do one thing at a time. That's why, what's the Jewish tradition Friday night? You first serve the fish course, and then you have the chicken soup or the meat course or whatever it is. Why is the custom you serve first the fish and then the meat? Because the Rambam says that you should eat the lighter food first. That doesn't mean if you ate meat that you can't eat fish afterwards. But in order to eat fish and meat one after another, you need to rinse your mouth. And some people say also you should eat something in between, like a piece of challah in between the fish and the meat. So that's why, as everybody knows, the typical Jewish tradition is you have fish and then you rinse your mouth, and then again, it says in halacha, many poskim say you should also try to eat something in between them also, because then it cleans out the teeth a little bit better. But you must drink, or at least drink something between the fish and the meat. Now, what happens again, if somebody technically wants to eat fish and then wants to eat meat, and later on they get a good piece of herring, they want to eat a good piece of herring or whatever. So again, as long as they rinse out the mouth, and you also have to be careful with another thing. If your hands are dirty, let's say, pardon the expression, what happens if you eat fish with your hands? Okay. By the way, by great Polish Rebbes, they used to give out with their hands. They used to give out fish, dafka with their hands. It was an Indian to do it by hand. But if your hands are dirty, and now you're going to eat a piece of meat with your hands, like you're going to have, let's say you're going to eat a piece of fish with your hands, okay? And then you're going to have a hamburger on a bun. And again, you're using your hands that might be dirty from the fish. You have to wash your hands. In fact, in Shulchan Aruch speaks about 3 washings in a meal. You have to wash your hands 3 times in a meal. There's what's called mayim rishonim that we wash for bread, 3 times on the right, 3 times on the left, like we learned already. Then you have what's known as mayim acharonim, that if you wash before benching, we're very meticulous according to Kabbalah to wash mayim acharonim. And that was because in the olden times, they had what was called melech's doimis, a Sodomite salt. And that was used in cooking, and it was a very, very strong salt, very strong salt. And if you get it on your hands and you touch your eyes, it could, God forbid, cause permanent damage to the eyes. It was very, very powerful. Like everybody knows, in New York, they have salt that melts the ice, all that stuff. So it would mamish be very, very dangerous. So at the end, so the reason why people are lenient today with mayim acharonim, not in Chassidim, by us, we're very, very careful about mayim acharonim because it's Kabbalah. But the reason why people are more lenient, even the Fruma Litvish world, they not wash mayim acharonim. And by the way, it's not only Shabbos. Some people wash mayim acharonim on Shabbos. Mayim acharonim you have to wash every day. I mean, whenever you eat bread. So today they make why? Number one, we don't have that salt. We don't have melech's doimis today that people use. And secondly, people don't eat with their hands. They eat, years ago, they ate with their hands. They didn't have cutlery like we have today. They would eat with their hands. Today, we eat with the fork and a knife and a spoon. So it's not that important to wash mayim acharonim. Again, in the Hasidic world, in our world, mayim acharonim is a very holy thing. And it should be done. But then halacha speaks about, in Shulchan Aruch, in big Shulchan Aruch, it speaks about what's called mayim emtsoim, the middle water. Okay, so you have mayim rishonim, that's what you wash for bread. Mayim acharonim, the last water is at the end of the meal. And then you have what's called mayim emtsoim. What is mayim emtsoim? To wash your hands, the middle waters, meaning when you ate fish and you're going to eat meat and you ate the fish with your hands and you're going to eat the meat with your hands like they used to in the olden times. So then you need to wash your hands, because otherwise you're going to get fish and meat together on your hand and you're going to be eating it like that, and it's not healthy. It's sakana. Again, a lot of people are more lenient today in this because, again, we don't eat with our hands. So therefore, I don't have fish on my hands and I don't have meat on my hands, and therefore people are lenient with it. But if your hands, just for the record, if your hands are dirty, let's say somebody was serving fish, with it was whatever, a serving spoon, and they touch fish with their hands, halachically, before you eat meat, you're going to have to wash your hands. No bracha, but you're going to have to wash your hands, because there is a danger between meat and fish. And now, it's interesting in Shulchan Aruch it says that you're not allowed to eat fish and milk either. Before you get excited, that in the Shulchan Aruch, the Bais Yosef writes, you're not supposed to eat fish and milk together. Right away, the Shach, the Taz, all the commentators on the side, they're right, it's a mistake because it's supposed to be meat and fish. It's not supposed to be, there's nothing wrong eating milk and fish. And other poskim, there's a Rabbeinu B'chaya, there's a lot of other poskim that say, no, you shouldn't eat it. But the Pearl the Minig is like this. The Rebbe writes in the Rishimis, which revealed obviously after Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe writes, you don't eat fish and milk. In Shulchan Aruch it says, by the way, those people that are strict about not eating fish and milk, they write, though, it doesn't apply to butter. So the Rebbe writes, basically in a Rishima based on a Tzemach Tzedek, that it's only not to eat fish and milk directly. But let's say you want to have bagels, lox, and cream cheese, that the Rebbe writes there's not an issue with that. Some people are still machmir with that from past days, but the Rebbe writes that you don't have fish and milk, but you can have fish and cream cheese or butter or things like that. So that's why even in the very frum world, they're lenient that they have bagels, lox, and cream cheese, but they won't eat tuna and drink coffee with milk in it. Because that says, Taka, you shouldn't do, that you're not allowed to do. But again, right before, right after, that's not an issue. Okay. Okay, so in Kitzur it says between the meat and the milk, you should have, you should wash your, you should drink something and eat something. That's what it says there. Okay, now what else is there? Another thing halacha says, human sweat, okay, human sweat is poison except the facial sweat. This is what the Gemara says, and that's brought down even today. You're not allowed to, in other words, human sweat, so therefore they write, again, this doesn't apply to today's world, but they write you shouldn't put food under your arm if you're not wearing any clothing there. Why? Because there's sweat there, and it's poisonous, and it's going to do, or you shouldn't put money in your mouth. It's another thing Shulchan brings down, by the way. You're not allowed to put money in your mouth. Why? Because people touch it. There might be sweat on their hands. There might be sweat on the dollar bill or on the coins. And therefore, you're going to get sick from it. So all these things are mentioned in halacha that a person has to, be careful with all these types of things, that not to do things that are dangerous or sakana or bring a person to sakana. Another thing which is brought down, by the way, okay, there's another din in Shulchan Aruch also, it's a Gemara, that you're not allowed to drink liquid from a container that was left open overnight, uncovered. That means, let's say we would have, what the Gemara is talking about, let's say you would have a pot of soup or a pot of drinks, okay? And it was left overnight, you're not allowed to drink it. Why are you not allowed to drink it? The Gemara says, because in those days they would have snakes. Snakes would come into the house. They would drink from the container, and their venom is poison. So there would be snake poison in the drinks. So therefore it says today we're not careful in it. Why? Because today we don't have snakes in the house. But technically, if somebody would be going in the woods where there are snakes, and they would be in a place that they would, let's say, leave a container overnight, it's very possible you wouldn't be allowed to drink from it, because maybe there were snakes and came and drank from it, and they left venom in there and things like that. So you have to be careful with that. Okay. Now, you're not supposed to put food under or drink under a bed. You're not supposed to think why. I'm talking about under a bed that people sleep, that are sleeping on, not some under the bed. Why? Even if they're covered. Why? Because there's a ruach ra, there's a ruach, an evil spirit, resting on the food like this. But Al Pi Din, by the way, if it was done, Al Pi Din, you could eat the food. Some people may be more machmer not to, but halachically, in halacha poskim write that even if it was left under the bed, you're allowed to, even though somebody slept on the bed overnight, you would be allowed to do it. Same thing would apply to bunk beds. I mean, what's the difference? Under the bed means under both beds. Now, what happens, if you think about it, it's an interesting question. If you fly on a plane on a red eye, and you put your things, as the stewardess tells you, will you please put it under the seat in front of you? Okay, so you have your food that you brought on the plane, and you have food, you put it underneath the seat in front of you. Now, the person in front of you is sleeping overnight. You know, they have a mazel. Everybody, when you go on a flight, it's interesting. Everybody somehow falls asleep except you. It's something interesting at night. So the question is, can I eat that food? Is there a ruach on the food? So that everybody says already is not an issue. That's not a bed and they're not sleeping. I mean, whatever it is. But you're allowed to put your food, your snacks that you brought on board, you can put it under the seat in front of you, and there's no problem with that. Okay, some people have a minig, and a lot of people today, they write Shemer Mitzvah the Davara. They will not eat the drink food that was left over in a metal container, okay, or in a water in a. So lepel, the issue is like this: you have these urns, right? Typical urn, big urns. So for Shabbos is brought down already on halacha. Shabbos is protects, and there's no ruach ra on Shabbos and things like that. But what happens in many places, I'm telling you, most people are not careful in this at all. In many shuls, yeah, they have a big urn, and the water can last for a few days, and people drink every day, you know, and they don't change the water every day. So again, the reason why people do that, because most people today are not strict in that. For whatever reason is, and they say Shemer Mitzvah Li'eda Davara, and but again, this is all issues of raw. What's it called? Ruach ra and things like that are forbidden. Another thing is, by the way, which is part of this din, it's also Gemara, and the Alter Rebbe does bring it down Shulchan Aruch. You're not allowed to eat peeled garlic or peeled onion or peeled eggs that were left overnight without mixing something into it. If you mix something into it, then it's not a problem. Or if you leave over a little bit of the peel of the egg, you know, you didn't peel the whole egg, or you left the top of the onion and the top of the garlic, then there's not an issue with it. Okay, and there are people, by the way, if you notice in the stores, you'll find peeled garlic in jars. They're mamish peeled garlic with a hechsher of OU, and a lot of people buy it. But people should be machmer, even though there's a little bit of, it's not really the part of the garlic that halacha says to be left over. So, I mean, I can't say halachically is forbidden, but the way we hold, you shouldn't use those garlics that are already pre-peeled, unless, let's say you make egg salad. Okay, so you put mayonnaise in it, you put some spice or whatever, so then it doesn't apply. But if you have food, let's say a peeled egg, or somebody cracked an egg open, okay, and they didn't eat it, so you put it away in the fridge. So you have an open egg, peeled egg, basically. There's no shell left on it, and you left it over in the fridge overnight. So according to the way we hold, you have to throw it out. There are certain contemporary people that want to say if it's covered, it's in the fridge, it's okay, but we don't differentiate like that, and we wouldn't use it. So therefore, ideally, people should not buy the peeled garlic in a jar that there's nothing else added in it. Now, garlic powder, they all right, you could do. Onion powder, you could do. Egg powder, by the way, most bakeries, when they make the cakes or the cookies or the bread, whatever they make with eggs, they don't sit there and crack eggs. Unless if you're talking about maybe in the Hamish bakeries in Williamsburg or Borough Park, and even then most of them don't. But I'm saying that what they would do is they would again, if it's peeled, it's ground garlic, onion powder, they would. So what do? They use onion powder. So even when they do minced garlic in a jar, again, is okay. If it's ground up already, it's like onion powder, minced garlic, that stuff is already okay. I'm saying if you just have a piece of garlic that was left overnight, sometimes in that kitchen, you peel garlic and you put it in a cup and you're not planning to use it that day. So if you don't add a little bit of oil or salt or something to make like a food out of it, you really shouldn't be using it the next day. And this happens sometimes. People are planning a big event and they peeled eggs and the garlic and onions and they all did that, and you're talking about a lot. And then they realize they didn't put stuff in it and they left it overnight, and it's not such an easy thing halachically. In Shulchan Aruch, and the Gemara says you shouldn't eat it. That Rebbe being done, you shouldn't eat it. He says shouldn't eat any of those types of things because there's a ruach ra on it and it's no good. Also, halacha is you're not allowed to do things which are dangerous. For instance, you can't go on a shaky bridge. You're not allowed to go on a wall that can collapse at any moment. You're not supposed to go out alone at night. That might not apply today because today we have lights in the street. It's not like years ago. You shouldn't sleep in a room alone in a house, or it means in a house alone, unless poskim right, if you put on a light, even a little light, or other poskim say if you have a mezuzah on the door, then it's also good. But in Shulchan Aruch it says, in Gemara it says, if there's a dark room and you're alone in the house, you shouldn't sleep in the house alone, unless if you have a little light somewhere in the house, or other opinions say if you have a kosher mezuzah, then it's fine. I just want to mention one interesting thing, that years ago, most planes had 4-engine planes. Yeah, the planes were 4 engines. Then there was a time they went down to 3. And it was known that the Rebbe did not want people flying on 2-engine planes, and definitely not a single-engine plane. Because the Rebbe felt it wasn't safe. And so I remember it was personally with my brothers and I. So we used to schlep from Chicago to New York by bus. It was 16.5 hours schlep. It was a schlep. Then they started what was called youth fair. In the 60s, they started youth fair that if you go standby, you could get on for half the price of the ticket, which was cheaper than the bus. Okay, so then we used to fly from Chicago to New York by plane. And then the planes had 3 engines. Okay, we knew that the Rebbe wanted really 4 engines. So my older brothers wrote into the Rebbe and wrote to the Rebbe that most of the planes today are 3 engines. And we know that the Rebbe really wanted 4-engine planes. So could we go on them? And the Rebbe answered that because most planes are like that today, there's no problem with it. By the way, if you ever go on a flight today, you'll see that most planes, even from here to New York, have 2 engines. But again, the engines were perfected and it's common today. And, 2 engines today are probably better than 6 engines in the olden times. So today, it's not an issue at all. Okay, we're going to go to Tanya and we'll continue, Mr. Shem, this dangerous stuff next week.